Part 37. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 375. However, the irony is that after the women holding bloody buns left, Su Tong discovered that the executioners actually had a weak yin virtue. Although the yin virtue is very weak, some yin virtue is indeed integrated into their bodies. Interesting. Seeing this, Su Tong probably understood the entire practice process of these executioners. When the head falls to the ground, all grievances and grudges are eliminated. This is their practice. In addition to the silver distributed by the government, human blood steamed buns are also a way for them to make money. Not just making money, but also having a weak moral character. In his opinion, blood buns are like the Buddhist teachings spoken by monks in temples. Although they are fooling the world, their original essence is to bring spiritual comfort to desperate family members. Thinking of this, Su Tong suddenly had a strange idea in his mind. Since you can use the name of gods, why can't I? Don't forget, I am an upright paper maker, and I also shoulder the title of headmaster. In terms of uprightness, I am much better than you executioners. Thinking of this, Su Tong raised his brows slightly and planned to make a good plan after going back today. If this plan works, he may have found the password to unlock wealth. After bidding farewell to Gaozhou, Su Tong took Wang Zheng to find the address of Wu Qiudong, the top scholar in martial arts. Surprisingly, the place where Wu Qiudong lived was so simple that it was completely unreasonable. Even the houses of ordinary people in the capital look much better than this straw hut. There are various kinds of wood and processed tables and chairs piled in the yard. This made Wang Zheng on the side suddenly have a very bad feeling in his heart. You too, do you want to make some furniture? A middle-aged man came out of the room and saw Su Tong and Wang Zheng standing at the door. He walked up and asked with a smile. Wu Qiudong. He took a look at the middle-aged man in front of him. His skin was dark and his face was covered with dry wrinkles. Especially his hands, which were covered with calluses and slender wounds. What made him even more worried was that the middle-aged man is Lame. Yes, I am Wu Qiudong. Master, you can call me Carpenter Wu. When Wu Qiudong saw the clothes on Su Tong's body, he knew that this was not a wealthy man who was short of money, so he spoke more politely. You are Wu Qiudong. Wang Zheng looked at him with wide eyes, as if he wanted to eat someone. Before coming here, he had imagined many figures of Wu Qiudong, either tall and mighty, quiet and handsome, or rough and bold, etc. But it was obvious that the Wu Qiudong in front of him was completely different from the Wu champion he had imagined. He persisted and asked, You are the top scholar in Wu, Wu Qiudong. Huh. Hearing the words Wu Zhuangyuan, the smile on Wu Qiudong's face gradually faded. He glanced at Wang Zheng warily and objected in a cold voice, Sorry, you got the wrong person. There is no Wu Zhuangyuan here, only a lame carpenter. After speaking, he walked towards the room without looking back. Wait. Su Tong quickly stopped him. It doesn't matter whether you are the top scholar in martial arts or not, but do you know Magnolia? Wu Qiudong had already stepped into the door and paused for a moment. Su Tong looked at his slightly trembling body and knew something was up, and continued, Magnolia asked me to bring you a message. Wu Qiudong stood motionless at the door, but with his head slightly backward, he listened with his ears pricked up. She says. Su Tong deliberately lowered his voice, causing Wu Qiudong to unconsciously turn around to listen. However, he still didn't hear anything and couldn't help turning his head and glaring at Su Tong. What did she say? We are destined to be together in this life, but I will still be waiting for you at the same place in the next life. After saying that, Su Tong took out the jade bracelet from the eldest lady and thought to himself, Dad, don't blame me for trying to trick you. After all, who can say for sure what will happen in the next life? Old place. Wu Qiudong looked at the jade bracelet, his eyes gradually became empty, and he wanted to reach out his hand in a daze. Why? At this time, Su Tong put away the jade bracelet and said, "You can't give us things for free. You have to do us a favor." When Wu Qiudong heard this, his eyes became cold again, and he sneered, "You just pick up something and try to frame me. Why should I trust you?" Su Tong smiled, "Because my name is Ma Hongwen." Upon hearing the three words Ma Hongwen, Wu Qiudong's eyes suddenly widened, "You are Ma Chi's son." Su Tong quickly took a step back and said with a timid look, "Yes, Ma Chi is my father, and Magnolia is my mother. Can I use my mother to lie to you?" Wu Qiudong's breathing gradually calmed down and he glanced at the jade bracelet on Su Tong's hand. "Tell me, what are the conditions?" Su Tong pushed Wang Zheng, who was still dazed at the side. "Give him the boxing skills." "Teach boxing?" Wu Qiudong glanced at Wang Zheng up and down, his slender eyelids narrowed into a slit. "Yes, teach boxing. In addition to this jade bracelet, this guy will provide you with food, drink, and accommodation during his stay here without any trouble. He will also give you another filial piety every month as compensation for delaying your work." Su Tong tried his best to block Wu Qiudong's reasons for refusal from multiple angles. But Wang Zheng was still very uncomfortable. The Wu Qiudong in front of him was so different from the Wu Qiudong he imagined. Wang Zheng even once doubted whether this guy was a fake by Su Tong to fool him. Wang Zheng looked at Wu Qiudong, and Wu Qiudong also looked at Wang Zheng. I have to say, not to mention the identity played by Wang Zheng, but his appearance does fit the image of a warrior. If Wang Zheng and Gao Zhou look at each other, they are so skinny that they look like they will collapse if the wind blows. I guess Wu Qiudong at this time, he had already slapped his butt and left. "Practice? I've been practicing since I was a kid." Wu Qiudong nodded and glanced at the jade bracelet again, his eyes still seemed to be troubled. Su Tong saw that Wu Qiudong seemed to be struggling with something, and said while the iron was hot, "You can't bring all your skills into the coffin, you always have to leave something behind when you are alive. Even if you don't leave a name for history, you still have to leave something for future generations. A person is not given a chance." Snort. Wu Qiudong snorted coldly and raised three fingers. "Okay, if you agree to the three conditions, I will teach him boxing. Except for letting my mother come to see you, everything else is fine. After all, this cheap old man Ma Chi is very kind to him, and he cannot do anything to poach the old man. Besides, before entering the script, I also divined a hexagram, the family hexagram, based on my current background. In other words, if I want to prosper here, I still have to rely on my family background. If you make your home miserable, it will do you no good." Wu Qiudong was blocked by Su Tong first, and his expression was somewhat ugly. "However, if there is a chance, I can arrange for you to see my mother from a distance." Su Tong Xiao changed his tone and gave a compromise plan. "Why?" Wu Qiudong's expression became much sadder, but he still agreed, "That's all, it's not difficult to teach him boxing. I'll write you a prescription, and you'll prepare it for me. There should be no less than 3 meals a day of wine and meat. After the task is completed, I'll give it to you. I have 600 taels of silver." Su Tong stared at the expression on Wu Qiudong's face. Seeing that there seemed to be some unclear meaning in his eyes, Su Tong couldn't help but feel alert. But he still agreed, "After all, these are not problems. Can you really teach me how to box?" Wang Zheng was still a little hesitant. He raised his hand and aimed at the wooden stake next to him and slapped it. The wooden stake as thick as a bowl was immediately sent flying by Wang Zheng. The wooden stake was dug into the ground half a meter deep. Even a cow might not be able to pull the wooden stake out. With this strength, most people would be frightened when they saw it. When Wu Qiudong saw this, he just frowned and said, "I'll bury the stakes later." After saying that, he ignored Su Tong and turned around to enter the room. "You can just practice boxing here with peace of mind, and don't judge a book by its appearance. Looking at Wu Qiudong's demeanor, he obviously didn't take Wang Zheng's slap in his eyes. This also made Su Tong feel relieved. He patted Wang Zheng on the shoulder and signaled him to stay here and he would let people go in the evening. Send everything you need. Wang Zheng nodded, and before sending Su Tong away, he did not forget to remind him to bring him more soy sauce beef. After Su Tong walked away, he looked back at Wu Qiudong's dilapidated house. Jixiang, let your descendants pay attention. I'm afraid this old guy is not as honest as we think. He thought of Wu Qiudong's complicated eyes, and he was still a little worried about this Wu champion. Jixiang responded, flew out, and came back after a while. I don't know when there were many voles around the house. If there was any trouble, they would report it to him as soon as possible. After meeting the needs of Wang Zheng, a martial arts fanatic, Su Tong did not go home directly, but came to the vicinity of Jiajiahutong in the capital. There is an inconspicuous small alley at the foot of the capital city wall. There are slums under the high city walls, and patches of grey houses stand here. Not far away are scattered grey and dilapidated chicken feather houses. Most of these simple houses are opened by hotel owners, and most of the people who come in and out of them are beggars or poor people who have no place to live. What is a chicken room? To put it bluntly, it is a room filled with chicken feathers. A thick layer of chicken feathers covers the floor. At night, you put these thick chicken feathers on your body and it becomes a bedding. This kind of chicken feather room only costs a penny a night, regardless of men, women, old or weak. A poet once wrote a poem with this title, and the name was called Chicken Feather Room. The ice and snow are as windy as tigers, and those who cry naked have no shelter. At dusk, I beg for 3 coins to buy a sleep in a chicken feather room. Today's weather is getting colder and colder. Places like the chicken feather room were also in short supply. Su Tong even saw some naked men walking in naked. They sold all the cotton-padded clothes they had for the winter, and in exchange for money and food, they spent the winter in a chicken feather room, waiting until the winter passed and the flowers bloomed in spring before they came out to work. It seems like a ridiculous scene, but it happens every day here. Even so, a large number of people still freeze to death on the streets every year, and if a fire breaks out in a place like a chicken house, the consequences will be even more disastrous. This kind of thing has happened before. It is said that in a fire, the people inside have no time to escape. The chicken feathers ignite so quickly that only a little spark can turn the entire house into a furnace in an instant. But so what, for these people, living is the most important thing. Headmaster, what are you doing here? Dia squatted at the entrance of the hall and saw Su Tong standing there motionless, wearing a cotton coat with gold piping, which looked out of place in this place. Hearing Daya's inquiry, Su Tong raised his eyebrows slightly, licked the corners of his slightly dry lips, and looked at the people who were still struggling in the mud with hot eyes. Don't you think, these people are all naked, is it the merit of fruit? Infinite script killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 376. When Su Tong returned home in the evening, he felt a rush of heat as soon as he entered the door. A warm pot has been burned in the room, and cotton curtains have been hung inside and outside the room. Where have you been running around every day? When the eldest grandma saw him coming back, she couldn't help complaining. Su Tong grinned and walked to the eldest grandma. Mom, I just came back from outside. You always want me to go out to have some tea and chat with my friends. The eldest grandma shook her head. Your father can tell you that he will let you rest for a few days, and you will have to go to the palace to be on duty. That's nature, that's nature. How could I miss this wonderful place, Qin Tian Prison? Besides, in addition to Qin Tianjian, there are many treasures in the entire palace. If I can't take the opportunity to plan them early, it will be too late to arrange them later. Mom, look. The eldest grandma glanced at Su Tong's cramped palm and couldn't help but roll her eyes. Why don't you have a moment every day to make people worry-free? How much does it cost? Not much, just give me this number. Su Tong stretched out his finger. 300 taels. Add 10,000 characters after it. The eldest grandma stopped holding the rosary in her hand, raised her head and looked at Su Tong. 3 million taels of silver. It would be best if you understood it as gold. Su Tong picked up the teacup on the table and took a sip. I don't understand. The eldest grandma's voice broke, and she stared at her precious son. Even if you sell your mother, you still can't get 3 million taels of silver. Of course Su Tong would not tell the eldest lady that he had actually sold her at a good price. Then he picked up a piece of pastry from the table and stuffed it into his mouth. Isn't this asking you to give me a trick? You kid, 3 million taels of silver. Even if your father is sitting in the position of Admiral of the Nine Sects, he can't afford that much money. What is the concept of 3 million taels of silver? Calculated based on the current grain prices in Daetong dynasty, 10 cents can buy a pound of rice. This is because of the current disaster. Poor people who cannot afford grain can buy coarse grains such as sweet potatoes to satisfy their hunger, and the price will be cheaper. 3 million taels of silver, at a small scale, was enough for the court to use to provide disaster relief in Henan. At a large scale, it was enough for the court to build a powerful naval force. Such a large amount of money, let alone the 9 admirals, even the Empress Dowager Cixin would not be able to collect such a large amount of money in a short time. I know, but I don't want all the money at once. You can give me a small sum, and I will figure out the rest by myself. Su Tong knew the concept of this money, but he really needed such a large amount of money. On the way back he thought clearly. Why, regardless of whether they are from the upper or lower realms, even those with shameful deeds, do not do the great merits of saving all sentient beings in front of them, but want to earn some merits from poor people. They don't have that ability? No, as long as a stranger stands up, one person can match the capabilities of 10 or even 100 people in the government. Take Su Mao, who escaped from Lianshan Temple last time, for example. With his paper shadow technique, he could turn a small house into a small house with a flick of his hand. If he built a few more buildings, no one would freeze to death on the streets in winter. But he didn't. There are many strangers like Su Mao, but no one has come forward so far. Why? There is only one answer. No money. Wealth lovers are in the Dharma land. For those who are practicing, wealth comes first. Even if you are a land god, you will be hungry sometimes if you have no money. Not to mention, if you want to do great meritorious deeds, you will almost be unable to survive without money. Especially the practitioners in the lower realms, even the vast majority of them do not live a wealthy life. Just take the executioners we saw today as an example. The official salary plus the money for blood buns was only enough for them to have food and clothing. After all, beheadings did not happen every day. Generally speaking, the peak season in this industry is concentrated in the autumn. Unless you commit a heinous crime, there won't be that much work for you to do. You can still make a living by farming on weekdays. You have to say, these people are capable, but they still can't make money. Well, this involves another problem, 3 disadvantages and 5 shortcomings. Although the 3 religions of Confucianism, Buddhism, and Taoism do not have this restriction, they have strict rules and regulations that restrict them. Such as the monks' pure rules and precepts, Quanzhen's ascetic rules, Confucian gentlemen's rules, etc. If you choose to practice in this area, you must abide by the rules. Coupled with your huge size, every move may cause many problems, leading to there is no way they would come forward to do such a thankless thing. After all, they don't do anything. They can improve their abilities by relying on their own cultivation methods, so why do they need to do such a thing? People in Xianji Yuliu don't have so many restrictions, but they can't do anything they want to do. 1 has no money, 2 has no power, 3 has nothing to do, and 4 has no one. Those who are miserable, whether they can survive tomorrow's sun is a problem, but they still care about the life and death of others. So they don't have this ability, but unfortunately they do. If the fox soul saved in the soul coffin shop was only exchanged for the blessing of wealth from 3 scripts, the price and gain would be completely unequal in the eyes of normal people. This does not comply with the principle of equivalent exchange. But it wasn't until I figured out the reason that I realized that these 4 words, wealth blessing, had already pushed me to the threshold of the prosperous road. All he needs to do next is a final kick, and he can quickly gather a large amount of power in a short period of time. This is like a blogger with tens of millions of fans who only needs a way to monetize his traffic. The small number Su Tong mentioned was an astronomical amount when looking at the investment of 3 million taels of silver. No matter how much the eldest grandmother doted on her only son, she would not be able to come up with so much money. What on earth are you going to do? If you keep messing around, I will ask your father to come and have a good talk with you tonight. The eldest grandma couldn't help but get a little angry when she saw that Su Tong was still pestering him for money. Nothing else, just be a good person, do good deeds, and build some virtue for our family. Su Tong ate all the pastries on the table in a short time. Go, no money. When the eldest grandma heard such outrageous words, she became even more unhappy. How could she not know what her son was? To put it bluntly, the reason why she has prayed and chanted to Buddha all these years is because this little ancestor was so damaged. But even if Ma Hongwen is no longer a thing, it is still a piece of flesh that has fallen from his body. Even if someone stabbed her spine secretly, she could bear it. I just hope that this child will be less worried and do less evil in the future, so as to leave a lasting impression on the old Ma family, so that she can meet the ancestors of the Ma family. Mother. Seeing this, Su Tong could only resort to Ma Hongwen's trick of acting like a fool and rolling around. The grandmother looked grim and gritted her teeth when she saw that Ma Hongwen started acting like a fool again. However, she finally took out a few banknotes from her sleeves and said, "That's all." After saying that, she walked to the inner room with the help of the maid. When she reached the door, the grandmother stopped. "Go ahead, pay 3,000 taels of silver to the accounting room first. In addition, during your absence, the Chen family, my young lady, has come to see me frequently. It's time for you to go to Chen's house and return the favor." Su Tong was stunned when he heard the words, and he understood in a moment. "Yes, I didn't say it, but I had forgotten that wealth is the law of a married couple. Wealth is the first, and love is the second. If you guard the god of wealth, are you afraid of running out of money?" So he smiled and said, "You still love me." After saying that, he accepted the money and returned to his side courtyard. "Headmaster, are you really prepared to save those people?" Dia and the other 3 lay down at the entrance of the hall and asked, "If these things succeed, they will also be the biggest beneficiaries. After all, merit is the lifeblood of immortals like them." "Of course, but this matter needs to be carefully planned. We can't be the leader. We need to find someone to support us from the front." Su Tong still understands the principle of killing the first bird with a gun. He can absorb so many merits by himself, but he may not be able to protect them. Besides, you can't do it in your own name, otherwise how can you be a yaman safely? While he was saying this to Dia, Su Tong pushed open the door and walked in. He saw Huo Wuji and the others gathering in the yard to drink. Lero and the female thief were sitting aside chatting. After Su Tong looked around at such a large circle of people, he raised his eyes and walked up to Huo Wuji and the others. Looking at the faces of Huo Wuji and the others, Huo Wuji and the others seemed to notice the serious look on Su Tong's face. They immediately closed their mouths and waited quietly for Brother Ma to speak. Su Tong took out the tobacco rod and cut tobacco from the props book. Bai Shitong and Qian Shu immediately helped Su Tong put the cut tobacco on the table and light the firewood. Su Tong took a deep breath, puffed out the smoke, And his face finally showed the madness of Mr. Ma again. Everyone, it's time to get to work. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 377. The capital city is the capital of the world. From the perspective of outsiders, there are more than 3 capital cities. If you pay more attention to things, there will be more officials and rich businessmen. Pay attention to this thing. To put it bluntly, it is caused by too many rich people making trouble. Just like the bowl of plain noodles in front of Mr. Chen. The white noodles don't even have a layer of marinade, but the cost of making this dish is only 2 taels of silver. Crazy. If you take 2 taels of silver to a roadside noodle stall and tell the boss to cook white noodles for 2 taels of silver, the boss will wonder if you are trying to commit suicide. This is the truth, but this plain noodles is not something you can eat on the streets outside. This noodle is made from fine chickens, bled and dried, ground into powder and mixed into white flour. The soup used to cook the noodles looks like boiled water. However, this soup is actually a broth made from more than 10 kinds of ingredients and large bones, fed slowly over a slow fire. It looks as clear as water, but in fact it tastes delicious. Let alone cooking noodles with this soup, if you blanch a piece of Chinese cabbage, it is also extremely delicious. What Mr. Chen likes to eat most is this bowl of plain noodles. He happily slurps it into his mouth, no matter what toppings are sprinkled on it, and what other things are sprinkled on it are just a waste. While we were having a good time, we heard someone from outside reporting that our future uncle-in-law, Ma Hongwen, was here. When he heard about Ma Hongwen, Chen Yuanhui's heart skipped a beat. To be honest, he was not sure about this uncle. After all, the name Ma Hongwen was famous in the capital. Otherwise, at such an old age, why wouldn't they even have a matchmaker at their doorstep? Mr. Chen was willing to marry off his own girl. He seemed to be a noble man, and was often used as a target. But in my heart, I just want to keep the stability of the whole family. After all, he had offended this boy in front of the Peach Blossom Temple. The old god seemed to be praising him for his good luck and meeting a noble person that day. However, if you listen carefully and think about it, you will understand that this is not a compliment, but a warning. After much thought, Chen Yuanhui gritted his teeth and gave away the apple of his eye. If he had a choice, how could he push Miss Jing into the fire pit? Facts also proved that his choice was correct. It didn't take long for Ma Qi to become the Admiral of the 9 Gates. Coupled with the power of the Xiang family, these 2 families have joined forces. One controls the imperial army, and the other controls the world's soldiers and horses. I am afraid that no one except the current emperor and the Empress Dowager Cixin can offend these 2 families. So when Chen Yuanhui heard that Ma Hongwen was coming, he felt conflicted and happy at the same time. He put down the bowls and chopsticks in his hands and went out to greet him. Fortunately, the stinky face that worried Chen Yuanhui surprisingly did not appear on Ma Hongwen's face today. Not only did it not appear, Ma Hongwen also bowed to him respectfully, which made Chen Yuanhui feel flattered. Not only did Su Tong smile cordially, but he also brought a large cart of gifts to Mr. Chen. People who didn't know better thought he was here to propose marriage. Chen Yuanhui hurried forward to greet him, took Su Tong's hand and walked into the house cordially. The maid served fragrant tea, and Mr. Chen couldn't help but ask for help. After finishing the polite words, Su Tong didn't show any politeness and directly explained his intention. When he heard that Su Tong wanted to borrow money, Chen Yuanhui's heart skipped a beat, but his expression remained calm and he asked with a smile, "I wonder how much my nephew wants to borrow." "Borrow as much as you can." Su Tong held the tea bowl and said with a smile. The corner of Chen Yuanhui's mouth twitched a few times, and his words were more powerful than a lion speaking directly. You don't know how much you can borrow. If you borrow less, your uncle will lose his temper, but he can do anything. After much thought, Chen Yuanwei was a well-known and wealthy businessman in the capital, and he had already made a mental decision in a short period of time. They are all from my family, borrowing them is too polite. Then he called the accountant and asked in front of Su Tong, how much cash is there in the house? The accountant casually took out the account book. As Mr. Accountant, as long as the master calls himself, it must be about money, and the account book must be carried with him. Open the ledger and take a look. Master, our family currently has 254,327 taels of silver and 12 coins. After finishing speaking, he put the account book on the table. The accounts above are written clearly, which shows that the professionalism of Mr. Chen Yuanwei, the accountant, is beyond doubt. Is there any payment due this year? Yes, our silk and satin factory needs to allocate 300 taels of silver, the bank needs to allocate 3,000 taels of silver, and the monthly payment of the workers at the port needs to be settled, which is about 200 taels. The accountant marked the places that needed to be allocated one by one. A rough calculation shows that almost 4,000 taels of silver will be allocated. Okay, allocate the remaining 50,000 taels now. I need it urgently. After saying that, he ignored the horrified expression of the accountant and turned to Su Tong and said, my dear nephew, we only have so much cash in cash. You should take the emergency first. When next spring comes, I will take back the silver from several places. I can still make more money, it's no problem to scrape together tens of thousands taels for you. I have to say that Chen Yuanwei's approach is not clever, but it is more straightforward. Look, I have shown you how much money my family has. Now I have lent you almost all the money in my family. Who wouldn't be grateful? Even if Su Tong could tell that Chen Yuanwei's act was deliberately done for him to see, he still couldn't turn a blind eye as he should cooperate with his performance. Immediately he congratulated, thank you, my father-in-law. The word father-in-law made Chen Yuanwei instantly feel that the money was worth spending. The next process was much simpler, including eating and listening to music. During this period, Su Tong's young lady from the Chen family also came to accompany him. Su Tong looked at it seriously this time and thought to himself, this guy Ma Hongwen is really destined to die. Okay. Although there are no details in the script, judging from Ma Hongwen's situation, as long as the Ma family relies on the Xiang family, even if the Datong dynasty dies, the Ma Hongwen family will still live happily. It can be said that in troubled times, a sure winner in life. Master. At this moment, a servant came over and whispered a few words in Chen's ear. Although the voice was very low, it could not be hidden from Su Tong's ears. Master, something happened outside. I don't know what happened. There was a sudden rat trouble. Fortunately, there was no damage to our house. But I heard that many granaries were stolen, and even the chicken feather house was also damaged. There was a commotion, and some people were bitten by rats. Upon hearing this, Chen Yuanwei just nodded and sent the person away. Su Tong continued to listen to the music as if he was at ease. Only when it was getting late did he stand up and say goodbye. Master, you gave him so much money, this money. Mr. Accountant waited for Su Tong to leave, then walked up to Mr. Chen with a grimace and complained. What are you afraid of? Chen Yuanwei curled his lips nonchalantly, his father asked me for nearly 800,000 taels of silver last time. I have no intention of getting such a lot of money back. 50,000 taels is nothing. When the accountant heard this, he immediately lost his temper. The most powerful man in the family, how could he dare to say anything wrong? He just feels sorry for her. 50,000 taels of silver is not a small amount of money. Seeing the bitter look on Mr. Accountant's face, Chen Yuanwei smiled instead. For 1 tael of silver, you can go to Gongdelin and order a table of food, but if you use 1 tael of silver to buy a knife, you can eat it every day, got free meals. When the accountant heard this, he was thoughtful for a moment. But this knife is too expensive. Good goods are not cheap, but cheap goods are not good. A peerless knife is worth it no matter how expensive it is. When the world becomes chaotic and you don't have a knife, you will just become meat on the chopping board. Yes, yes, yes. Mr. Accountant nodded and walked out holding the account book. After walking outside the door, he shook his head and smiled. Can the Datong dynasty still be in chaos? I think the master is really old. On the other side, when Su Tong returned home, it was already late at night. The doorman should have fallen asleep at this point. Su Tong could have just climbed over the wall and entered, but he still knocked on the door. After a while, the door opened. It's just that the person who opened the door was not the Ma family's guy, but the old man Wen Yuan, the god of the house. Came back. Well, I'm back. Come in first. Su Tong walked in the door and followed the old gentleman. You were not at home a few days ago. Where did you go? I went out on business with Mr. Gongjing. Su Tong replied. As he spoke, he walked to the front, pushed open the door of the private school, walked into the room and was about to light the lamp. Behind him, Mr. Wen Yuan frowned. No, I always feel that the light is too dazzling recently, so I won't light it. Stop. But Su Tong didn't stop, he still took out the match and lit the lamp. There is a sentence in his mouth. Yesterday the bright moon shined on the old people, for whom does the new light shine at night? Huh. Mr. Wen Yuan was startled and couldn't help but mutter a few words repeatedly. Whose poem is this? Have you never heard of it? I don't know either. I happened to see it written like this in a book. As Su Tong spoke, he closed the lampshade, and a dim light suddenly illuminated the room. Mr. Wen Yuan looked at the lamp and couldn't help but turn his head. Su Tong took a deep breath. After all, the most important part of his plan still lies with this old gentleman. After thinking about the lines in his mind, he quickly entered the state of mind. Mr. Wen Yuan was still wondering where the poem just came from, when he suddenly heard faint sobbing coming from behind him. Looking back, I saw Su Tong lowered his head and his shoulders were shaking slightly, and occasionally he could hear sobs. Son, you man, what are you crying for? Mr. Wen Yuan sat down with his back to the light, took Su Tong's arm and expressed concern. Gentlemen. Su Tong raised his head, his eyes were red and swollen, and he knelt down on the ground with a plop. That day when my husband called me, I just thought it was a hallucination after drinking, and it was caused by missing my husband too much. It wasn't until I heard Mr. Gongjing talk about the underworld that I realized that although Mr. Gongjing was dead, his spirit was immortal. Now that he is a god in heaven and earth, although Hongwen is happy, he knows that if he enters the divine way, taking a step back will lead to an abyss, so how dare he hide it from him? Wen Yuan was startled, and immediately his face darkened. Seeing this, Su Tong hurriedly said, Sir, if you don't believe it, look over there. Wen Yuan followed the direction of Su Tong's finger and turned around, only to see a huge mirror standing there. Under the light, she saw only Su Tong's figure in the mirror, but she did not see herself. When Mr. Wen Yuan saw this, his eyes widened. He walked to the mirror in disbelief and saw that there was no reflection of himself in the empty mirror. There was a thunder in my mind, and I heard the sound of the suana and bursts of crying. The image of myself lying quietly in the coffin flashed in my eyes. He sat down on the chair and was stunned for a moment before he suddenly realized, I am dead. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 378. Mr. Wen Yuan sat on the chair for a long time, seemingly accepting the fact that he was dead without difficulty. Su Tong did not wait to think any more and continued, Sir, you are now the body of a yin god, but this is not a good path. The so-called Shinto means naturally to accept people's incense and cultivate into a righteous god. Yinshin is just a process, not a result. Only by being recognized by the world can one become a yang god, otherwise it is an evil way. Therefore, if Mr. Wenyuan cannot go further, after more than 10 years, the Ma family's fortune will decline, and Mr. Wenyuan will also be destined to die together. As for reincarnation, I'm sorry, if you choose to stay in the human world, it has nothing to do with their underworld. Fortunately, I met an immortal at Daowen Temple a few days ago. The immortal taught me a magical method that can help you escape from the sea of suffering, but... Su Tong hesitated. Just what? Wenyuan asked. It's divided into 30 and 70. Wenyuan sighed. He obviously understood that his situation was not good. Hearing this, he sighed, it costs 30% for one mouth. This immortal is too dark. Su Tong shook his head, no, 70% belongs to others, and we take 30%. About dawn, Su Tong walked out of Wenyuan's room. The servants couldn't help but be surprised when they saw Su Tong walking out of the schoolroom. Su Tong hummed a little tune all the way to the main hall, where Ma Chi was eating with his grandma. When Ma Chi saw his son coming back, his face suddenly lost its good looks. Nyezang, where are you fooling around again? With 3,000 taels of silver, you plan to separate from me. Su Tong grimaced, rolled his eyes, and hid beside his grandmother. Forget it, he went out for a trip, and I heard that everyone who went out with him died. Our son was lucky enough to come back, just to calm him down. After the grandma finished speaking, she glared at Ma Chi angrily, you two, go to a place as far away as the mountains, and you don't stop me. If something goes wrong, what will I do if you want me to do it? Ma Chi knew that he was in the wrong, so he could only hold the bowl and put his head in his mouth to eat. While eating, he muttered, I never knew that something like this would go wrong. Besides, didn't the person come back safely? After saying that, sensing the unkind look in Grandma's eyes, Ma Chi put down the bowls and chopsticks, I'm full. After saying that, he stood up and walked out. Before he reached the door, he glared at Su Tong angrily and said, I'll spare you this once. I'll go back to work as an errand tomorrow. After Ma Chi left, the eldest lady pulled Su Tong over and quickly asked someone to serve Su Tong rice. By the way, he didn't forget to ask what the name of the new maid in his room was. The new maid that the eldest grandmother said was the female thief. Su Tong naturally had his purpose in bringing her back. When the eldest grandma asked, she waved her hand, it's not a maid, my friend. I will send her to the palace tomorrow to be a palace maid, so she can have a place to live. Su Tong is eating here. The streets outside were very lively, and rats came out of nowhere and made noise all over the city. Some people even woke up in the morning and found mice lying on the bedding, busy carrying on the family line. Those who have mattresses are fine, but those who live in chicken feather houses are even worse. If there were only one or two, it would be easy to deal with, but now there are too many rats, making people and dogs restless. Someone invited a rat-catching team. As a result, early the next morning, the rat-catching team's house was full of rats, and they bit the rat-catching team members. It is said that half of the lifeblood of the captain of the rat-catching team was bitten off. As soon as the news came out, no one's mouse-catching team dared to catch mice anymore. Just when people were at a loss what to do, a fat Taoist priest suddenly appeared on the street. The Taoist priest walked to the street and saw a group of people surrounding a rat cage, and quickly stepped forward to stop him. Hey, no. Everyone was seriously harmed by these rats. After hearing the Taoist priest's words, they couldn't help but look back. Infinite Heavenly Lord. The Taoist priest kowtowed and waved the whisk, and the rat cage opened. What's even more surprising is that these mice did not run away, but crawled in front of the Taoist. The Taoist reached out and grabbed one of them, and after asking him what was going on, the mouse squeaked, jumped to the ground, and led everyone forward. "Oh my God, these rats have become sperm." Seeing the mouse leading the way, the people were shocked. Some people even knelt on the ground and shouted that the mouse fairy had appeared. I saw the mouse leading everyone to an alley. At the end of the alley is a dilapidated house, with the doors and windows locked, and no one knows what is going on inside. Next to the alley is the Jifefang slum, and there is no one living nearby. Wait until they open the door and take a look. Everyone was stunned. In this inconspicuous house, there were more than 10 people lying scattered around. Some of these people were almost dead, and some were already dying. Everyone looks skinny. "Don't go in, these people are sick." Upon seeing this, the Taoist priest hurriedly stopped everyone from entering the house. After careful observation, he concluded that it might be a plague. He asked the government to notify the government and asked the government to recruit doctors, and explained, "These rats did not deliberately come out to cause trouble, but came to report to you in advance under the instruction of a blessed immortal. Fortunately, we discovered it early. If we had waited a few more days, the plague would have spread, and by then there would have been countless casualties, and the people would be in dire straits." When these people heard this, they all asked about the name of this blessed immortal and which immortal he was. "This one, he has a long story." The fat Taoist priest pinched his beard and began to educate everyone about the matter. At the same time, statues of lucky immortals began to be sold on the streets. Not only could they keep you safe, but as long as you sincerely made a wish to lucky immortals would bless you. "Old man, look, this is Fu Xian." An old lady came in carrying a wooden lump and placed it on the altar table in front of her. The old man looked at the old woman's nervous look, then glanced at the little rice left in the tank and sighed, "What the hell, Fu Xian? No matter how hard you think of, it's hard to say whether our family can survive this year." The old lady was helpless when she saw this. Nowadays, the price of rice is getting more and more expensive, one price every day. If this continues, whether they can survive until next year is one thing. Thinking of this, the old lady knelt on the ground, looked at the statue of the Immortal of Fortune, and remembered what the man who sold the statue said, "Please go back to the Immortal of Fortune, you must be sincere, sincerity will lead to success." It can be regarded as an attitude of giving it a try. It is always better to have hope than no hope. As a result, the two of them slept until midnight when they heard something moving in the house. But they didn't care. Their family was so poor that even if a thief came in, they would have to go back empty-handed, so they just buried their heads and continued to sleep. The next morning, while the old man was still lying in bed, he heard a scream, which made the old man tremble. "What's wrong?" The old man picked up the stick and rushed into the kitchen, only to see the old lady standing in front of the rice vat in the kitchen, looking ecstatic. Looking again, the empty rice vat was actually filled with rice. They are not the only ones in this situation. When people had the mentality of giving it a try, they found that it actually happened. Now the name of Fu Xian became very popular. Did you hear that Fu Xian was born? Isn't that right? Nowadays, statues of immortal Fu are extremely rare. Stop talking, I'll go and ask for one. Then I'll see if I can make a fortune or something. Hey, you are not good at this. It is said that you have to be sincere. I don't care about a fortune-seeking immortal like you. Rumors about Fu Xian can be heard from time to time on the streets along the way. But these have nothing to do with Su Tong. He is not Fu Xian. At best, he is just a shareholder of Fu Xian. I provided packaging and initial financial investment for Mr. Wen Yuan. As for the responsibility of transporting food and listening to the people's prayers, I naturally left it to the great steward Ji Xiang. All the credit goes to Mr. Wen Yuan. When the time comes, he will only need to give himself part of the incense as reward. This is fair. In this way, even if something happens in the future, it will be his own business and has nothing to do with him. As for the incense merits obtained, Su Tong found out awkwardly that he seemed to have no use for these things. The practice method of worshipping Shankao still required a large number of evil ghosts and ghosts, which had nothing to do with it. So Su Tong kept some of these things, and gave the rest to Dia and the others. So, if you do this yourself, isn't there any reward? Of course there is, and it's not just an ordinary return. Just last night, my proficiency in Qi Men suddenly increased to 1,000 points. It directly broke through to level LV3. After the breakthrough, I suddenly had a deeper feeling about the unknown. He raised his head and looked at the majestic forbidden palace in the distance. He saw red smoke billowing and a thin golden dragon wailing at the bottom of his lungs. Behind the golden dragon, coiled with a large python, the golden dragon was almost out of breath. Angry. Looking to the other side, I saw vague outlines vaguely emerging over the huge capital city. These outlines were hidden or visible, and it was difficult to detect without looking carefully. People often say that there are gods 3 feet above the head. He thought these must be those so-called gods. Just as he was thinking about it, he looked up and walked to the palace gate. An old eunuch was standing there waiting for him. Su Tong looked back at the woman behind him. Go in and be a little palace maid first. I will take care of you inside. Don't think about escaping, otherwise. Yang Qi shuddered when she heard this. She was already familiar with the methods of Mr. Ma in front of her. Just last night, while Huo Wuji and others were not around, she stole a sum of money and tried to escape, but she just escaped. Not far out, he was blocked by a group of rats. She could no longer resist the slightest thought of resisting this terrible demon, so she nodded obediently, walked to the old eunuch reluctantly, and was pulled into the palace by the old eunuch. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 379. Wang Zheng is practicing boxing, Gao Zhou is refining corpses, Huo Wuji and others are busy spreading the word about Fu Xian. When Yang Qi was sent to the palace, Jixiang and Dia were also very busy now. Ji Xiang is responsible for controlling the rats in the capital, while Dia needs to constantly collect intelligence and identify the needs of ordinary people. For example, if a family has been unlucky recently and their life is almost unbearable, this is within the scope of help. If a family wants to have prosperous gambling luck, just ignore it. If you encounter any trouble, let Fa Cai handle it. This guy also has a certain fighting ability, and he will have no problem dealing with cats and dogs. Su Tong's side finally became quiet. Are you clean? Of course not, because there is one more thing he needs to figure out. After returning home and lying on the chair, Li Ro came over carefully with a plate of snacks. This girl had been in the house for a while and had become accustomed to the life here. In addition, since she was the girl in her own room, other servants did not dare to make things difficult for her. You really can't remember what happened to you in the past. Su Tong opened his mouth and ate the orange that Li Ro had picked, and looked at Li Ro again. In the past, I didn't see this girl clearly enough, but after Kimin was promoted, when I looked at this girl again, I found that there was a special wave surrounding this girl. It was like the lines resonated strongly with everything around them. What made him feel even more weird was that there were always some vague shadows vaguely visible behind Li Ro. If these shadows are the gods in the dark, then does their appearance behind Li Ro mean that Li Ro is the person they protect? What is her origin, and why does the White Lotus Saint in Lianshan Temple look like her? Master, why are you looking at me like this? Li Ro asked with embarrassment as Su Tong stared at her. Look how beautiful you are. Su Tong was eating an orange, glanced at the orange peel on her hand, and casually took the orange peel from her hand. My little hands are so soft. Master. Li Ro scolded, got up and ran back to the room. After Liro left, Su Tongke took the orange peels in his hand and used the plum blossom number to calculate a divination for her according to the number of divided orange peels. It's hard to say whether the results are good or bad. Fire and water, Wajigwa. This kind of hexagram indicates that things are not over yet, and there will be danger if you act rashly. However, it is not a death hexagram, which means that things will turn around. Young Master Xiang's family is having a banquet tonight. The master and young master are invited to the banquet. The master said that you should go to the Xiang's family in advance to wait. The gifts have been prepared by the eldest grandma. Su Tong was doing his fortune-telling when the servants of the family came to report. Su Tong waved his hand to show that he understood. He clapped his hands and saw a black wind flying in, rolling under Su Tong's feet, revealing a huge rat head. What's going on with the Xiang family? Have no idea. Surprisingly, Ji Xiang, who controls the entire capital, was unable to find out about the Xiang family. After Ji Xianghao explained, Su Tong finally understood that the Xiang family's yard looked ordinary, but inside there was a master who had secretly arranged the four evils of Feng Shui. Some mice will die suddenly and inexplicably soon after entering. Even if they are lucky enough to survive, there are still many cats and dogs inside, and they are purely used as takeaways. It seems that there are still experts in the Xiang family. Although Su Tong was disappointed with the result, he was not surprised after thinking about it. After all, the Xiang family has been a pig in the limelight over the years, soaring to the sky. After the big shots in the imperial court passed away one after another, Xiang Gongbao's rise was almost unstoppable, and now he has become unstoppable when he dominates the world. If there is really no expert guidance behind this, it seems unreasonable. Since he couldn't know the purpose of the Xiang family's banquet tonight in advance, he could only go there once. Put on some festive clothes and bring gifts. When they arrived at Xiang's house, they saw a long queue of carriages outside. Of course, most people can't actually enter the gate at all, so they can only wait outside the door with gifts. Now the snack vendors at the roadside stalls were very happy. With so many people, we can't just wait around. In addition to the master who came, there are also the grooms and servants. Their food naturally falls on these stalls, which really makes a lot of people make a lot of money. Dingling, dingling. A carriage stopped in front of the Xiang family's gate. There was a bell hanging on the carriage and it was decorated with pink brocade. At first glance, she looked like a young lady from a wealthy family. Su Tong walked behind and looked at the woman coming out of the carriage. Ji Xiang, who was hiding at the entrance of the hall, said, "Headmaster, it's her. She's the one in Xianjiao Tower." Su Tong suddenly realized when he heard this, so she is the fourth player, Qiao Xiaofeng. The driver's servants sitting in the shade around him quietly poked their heads out and looked at it. Looking at that figure, several servants drooled with greed. It's so beautiful. She deserves to be the number one in Xianjiao Tower. Give me one night and it's worth dying for. Bah, give you one more night? Just give me a cup of tea. While several people were talking, Qiao Xiaofeng looked back as if she was feeling something. When she saw the group of servants who were staring at her with rapt attention, she gave them an unabashed look. One of the servants suddenly stiffened his joints and lay on the stone, trembling. "Hey, I've had enough." After Qiao Xiaofeng was invited to the door, Su Tongke walked in with the gift. The servants at the door all recognized him and knew that he was the eldest son of the March family. The steward even walked forward enthusiastically and said to Su Tong with cupped hands, "Oh, Mr. Ma came just in time. My young master is waiting for you behind." Su Tong casually put a piece of silver into the butler's hand. "Why is there suddenly a banquet in the house today? Why is it so lively?" The housekeeper calmly kicked the money into his arms. "Not long ago, an old immortal came to the house. He counted with his fingers and said that my master can have another son. He was born last night. Look at it." He is really a big fat boy, and the master was so happy that he specially prepared a banquet. Old Immortal. Su Tong could think of this old immortal as soon as he thought about it. He was probably the Sunlong Taoist from Daowen Temple. Brother Ma. At this time, he heard someone shouting behind him. Su Tong turned around and found that it was Mr. Li. Seeing this, the housekeeper wisely walked aside to greet other guests. Let's go. It's rare to be here together. Let's go in. I heard that there will be a performance by Jiao Xiaofeng tonight. Mr. Li pulled Su Tong forward. Just take a few steps. A group of foreigners wearing black robes appeared in the sight of the two of them. Mr. Li obviously had no good impression of these foreigners and snorted coldly, "These Western devils are really annoying." Even when they got here, they didn't forget to spread their bullshit Western religion. Su Tong looked around and saw two Western priests promoting the mythical epic of their holy see to those on the side. I have to say that foreign monks like to chant sutras. After a while, a string of shining silver crosses appeared on the necks of several of them. Do they believe it? Believe it or not. But this does not prevent them from being proud of it. The shining silver cross is more like a decoration that highlights their identity and expresses their uniqueness. Well, to put it simply, you can understand that Shamate is not mainstream. Brother Li, Brother Ma, this way. Xiang Keding waved to the two of them, "Quick, I'll take you to see something good." As he said that, he pulled the two of them toward the backyard. The Xiang family's mansion is surprisingly large. It is said that it was once a royal palace. There is a strange machine placed in the garden at the moment. Look, this is the latest steam generator given to my father by foreigners. Xiang Keding led the two of them to the machine. They saw that the machine was still running, and two servants on the side kept adding coal to it. Several elderly people were sitting aside waiting, and many officials were pointing at the iron lump. This is the latest steam motor from foreigners. It generates electricity quickly and stably, but it is not good at all. It burns too much coal. It uses 4 or 5 times more coal in one night than usual. Su Tong's ears twitched, and he thought the sound sounded so familiar. When he looked around, he saw Fu Anning standing in the crowd, enthusiastically introducing the origin of this thing to everyone. While he was talking, there were sudden flashes around him. But after a while, the light bulbs came on one after another. The lights turned on, illuminating the entire Xiang family. It was not dark yet, but it was illuminated brightly by these lights. Even Mr. Li, who has no good feelings toward foreigners, couldn't help but sigh when he looked at the lights around him. It's truly a blessing that conquers the world. In addition to generating electricity, it can also provide heating. There will be no need to burn coal stoves in the future, and the house will be very warm in winter. Xiang Keding smiled and joked to the two of them, "In the future, you can come to my house to drink. It will be very comfortable." Su Tong and Mr. Li were delighted when they heard this. Su Tong was about to speak when he suddenly felt a strange sense of peeping behind him and subconsciously looked back. I saw the light shining on the wrinkled face, and the slender eyes were blurred into a slit. Fu Anning stood behind him and looked at him with a half-smile on his face. "Mr. Ma, you are fine. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment." Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 380. Fu Anning's words were so sinister that Su Tong's face turned cold before he could open his mouth. Since he was returning to Beijing from field service, he had to return to his original duty station as soon as possible to accept the transfer. "You have been on vacation for a few days, and you plan to rest until the Chinese New Year?" As soon as these words came out, everyone around him looked over. After learning Ma Hongwen's identity, everyone was surprised that Fu Anning's reprimanding Ma Hongwen in public was too extreme. After all, even the supervisor of Kintian prison is only a third-grade official in the final analysis. Ma Chi has now been promoted to the rank of Admiral of the Nine Sects, ranking as a first-class official. To put it bluntly, Ma Hongwen is now a veritable yamane. The official under the 9 admirals dares not to give him face. Moreover, on today's occasion, the relationship between the Xiang family and the Ma family is very tight. Doing this will not only ruin the fun. If it makes the Xiang family unhappy, just a third-grade official like you, with any name, can make you miserable. However, facing the strange looks from everyone, Fu Anning seemed not to feel the strangeness. It still gives people a condescending feeling. Being scolded in public for no reason would make no one look good. What's more, the character played by Su Tong is the notorious Mr. Ma. However, just when Su Tong was about to have a seizure, he suddenly heard a cheer from not far away. Well said. The familiar voice, it goes without saying that it was Match. I saw Ma Chi walking down and holding Fu Anning's hand with a face full of enthusiasm. Brother Fu An's lesson is correct. I really neglected to discipline this rebellious son. I will feel more at ease if I hand him over to Brother Fu An to discipline him in the future. After speaking, Ma Chi glanced at Su Tong. I just told Mr. Fu An that after you go to the palace tomorrow to report your work, you can go to the inner hall of Kintian prison to be a schoolboy. Being a schoolboy for Mr. Fu An will be your blessing for 8 lifetimes. How dare you? No disrespect to you, sir, please be careful with your skin. When everyone heard this, they were immediately relieved. No wonder he has such a tough temper. His relationship has been discussed with Ma Chi. From now on, it will be the treatment of teachers and students. The teacher scolds the students, no matter what the background behind you, they all listen obediently. This is a rule from ancient times, no one can say anything. Su Tong stared at Ma Chi with wide eyes, and then at Fu Anning, who looked a little stunned, and thought to himself, I believe you, didn't you just come here? But Ma Chi stared at him, and Su Tong could only sigh helplessly, teacher. In his heart, he was pondering the reason why Fu Anning targeted him inexplicably. But then he thought about it, that was fine. After all, he was still very interested in the mysterious place of Qin Tianjian. Ma Chi's meddling not only made Su Tong at a loss, but even Fu Anning obviously didn't expect it. But Fu Anning knew that this was Ma Chi giving him a step up. Those thick hands held his arms, and under the honest smile, Ling Fu Anning smelled a hint of danger, and squinted at the cuffs. Suddenly his eyes tightened, and he saw that Ma Chi's other hand was actually holding a dark dagger under the wide cuff. The dagger was not long, only 3 inches. But there was a dark cyan texture on the blade, and there was a faint light in Ma Chi's hand. Fu Anning's mouth twitched, thinking, how come he has this thing in his hands? This dagger has its origins. I remember it seemed to be a tribute from the countries in the western region to Emperor Kong. It cuts iron like clay. At such a close distance, if Ma Chi really wanted to take action, in his current state, although he would not be killed, he would inevitably get a few bloody holes in his body. Obviously, we have to go down this step. But after thinking about it, this is a good idea. After all, this kid has ruined my big business and is following me right under my nose. Are I afraid that I won't have a chance to deal with him? So he grinned and nodded, what are you talking about, Mr. Ma? I can tell at first sight that this kid is extremely smart. It would be better to leave it to me. Then please. March let go, took out an apple from his other sleeve, cut a piece with a dagger and put it in his mouth. The banquet is about to start, let's go and wait in front. Ma Chi was very happy now. He had long wanted to find someone to take care of this little brat. When others heard the word Ma Hongwen, their faces turned green with fright. This is not for him to take care of. This is clearly sending Bai Ma'an to Pantao Yuan, just waiting to make a big fuss in the heavenly palace. As soon as the result came, he saw Fu Anning scolding his son with a dark face. Ma Chi was so excited at that time that he finally found Tang Monk who could recite the tightening curse. I just borrowed Poxia's donkey to get it done. What if this guy doesn't give me face? Then it depends on whether I prick you or not. Congratulations to brother Ma. Mr. Li congratulated from the side. Although Qin Tian prison is not favored by the Holy Master, it is a good place that only those with true talent and learning can enter. Yes, since ancient times, the officials in Qintian prison have been passed down from father to son. Outsiders cannot enter except under special circumstances. Xiang Keting agreed. Su Tong pretended to be sad on his face, and he began to wonder about the pros and cons of this matter. The banquet in the front hall was already served, and Prince Rong arrived belatedly. Su Tong glanced at him from a distance. He took a closer look at Prince Rong and couldn't help but be a little surprised. Otherwise, wasn't this prince the same one who killed the foreign priest on the dock before? Is this really a prince? Just as I was thinking about it, I heard a hey in my ear, and a figure sat directly on the empty seat next to Su Tong. And he whispered, "The hypocritical dragon has no life after all." Su Tong took a look. Who could he be if he wasn't Taoist Sun Long? Old God. Mr. Li highly respected this old god. This time, even Xiang Keting's attitude towards the Sun Long Taoist had greatly improved. Apparently, just after Su Tong left the capital, almost everything that Taoist Sun Long divined for them came true. Xiang Keting was indeed entrusted with an important task by his father and will report on his work soon. Mr. Li became confused when he said it. He was drunk and accidentally fell into the water. He was good at water and was not afraid of falling into the water. But what Mr. Li never imagined was that when he fell into the water and struggled to swim to the surface, he was shocked to find that a thick layer of ice had formed on the water above his head. Although it is about to enter winter, it is not cold enough for the lake to freeze, and it did not freeze when I fell. He kept swimming in an attempt to find an exit, but the ice surface was endless. At the moment of life and death, the talisman given by Taoist Sun Long shone brightly and melted the ice in front of him, and Master Li died. Escape. When he climbed out of the water and took a look, there was no ice anywhere, it was just ordinary water. He was so frightened that he became seriously ill for several days before he recovered. Later, when he inquired about it, he found out that during this time of year, people always drowned in the water for no apparent reason. Some people even watched the other person fall into the water, and instead of swimming upstream, they desperately plunged their heads under the water, and finally drowned themselves in it. According to the older generation, there is something in the water, and a few people are captured every year to be buried with them. In any case, after this battle, Mr. Li admired the Sun Long Taoist to the point of worship. Old Taoist Sun Long raised his wine glass and took a sip, then looked at Su Tong. "My little friend, we said goodbye last time and now we are seeing each other. I don't know if the prediction I made for my little friend is accurate." Su Tong looked around and found that this old Taoist who had not seen him for a while actually had another flower bone on his head. This time, he was only one short of the 3 flowers on top. "The master has all his plans, so you might as well give us another hexagram," Su Tong said with a smile. "You brought this to your door. Since you want to pretend to be 13, don't blame yourself for using you as free labor." Sure enough, Taoist Sun Long didn't expect Su Tong to be so shameless. According to common sense, shouldn't he be grateful to me? But since he is here, he is naturally prepared. It's just that the effect is slightly different from what I expected. He took out 3 tips bags and handed them to 3 people respectively. "You should open these 3 tips after you go back, but don't say what's inside, no one can say it. This thing is related to the future of the 3 of them and even." Having said this, Taoist Sun Long glanced sideways at Su Tong, his eyes full of meaning with a hint of unexplainable meaning. Network and life. As soon as these words came out, A cool breeze blew on the three of them. Even Su Tong couldn't help but trembled and looked at the kit in his hand. His expression became solemn for a moment. Immortal, where is the immortal? Mr. Li came back to his senses and was about to ask Taoist Sunlong what the thing he encountered in the water last time was. When he looked up, Taoist Sunlong had left without knowing when. I'm going to the hut. Xiang Keding looked at the kit in his hand, stood up suddenly and walked back. Mr. Li hesitated for a moment, then stood up. My dad is over there, I'll go take a look. Both of them left, and Su Tong silently opened the kit. Inside was a pill and a note. Su Tong didn't look at the pill. He took out the note in his hand and opened the note. There was only one line written on it: death in 3 days. Infinite script killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 381. Death in 3 days. Su Tong turned the note over and took a look. There are 4 words behind it: live towards death. Seeing these 4 words, Su Tong took out the elixir, probably because Taoist Sunlong was afraid that he wouldn't know what it was for. He also carved the words fake death pill on the elixir. Seeing this, Su Tong threw it into the prop book. Fake death pill. After consumption, the body's functions immediately stagnate and fall into a state of suspended animation. Duration, 6 hours. Cooling time, none. Note: in the state of suspended animation, you can still move freely, but you can no longer use prop cards and script points. Seeing the effect of this fake death pill, Su Tong silently took out a mirror from the prop book and looked at himself. Good guy, Yintang is so black that he turns purple, and 2 big hands, one black and one white, appear in his destiny. The black hand held an axe, but the white hand stretched out a slender chain as if to bind himself. The fate change above his head would have scared anyone to death, but Su Tong instead thought about it carefully. Fate itself may be a powerful force that cannot be easily controlled. With the ability of the life Ikemen, I feel like I have opened a cheat in the Golden Word sect. He carefully observed the changes in the destiny above his head. It was discovered that these 2 hands were not from the same person. The 2 seemed to be fighting each other, secretly competing, and he was caught in the middle. It seemed dangerous, but in fact it was not a dead end. As for how many more there are, he can't see them yet, but Su Tong is not in a hurry. Isn't it 3 days? After tonight, it's time to increase my Chi Men's contribution. If I increase my Kimen contribution again tomorrow night, it's almost time to upgrade. After I upgrade my Kimen to LV4, I will see what new changes there are. The worst thing is that there is a fake death pill. At this moment, Taoist Sunlong, who had just walked out of the gate of the capital, was in a good mood, and suddenly his nose felt itchy. Ah! There was such a loud sneeze, like thunder, and a strong wind blew up on the ground, causing the surrounding vegetation to sway. Taoist Sunlong rubbed his nose and felt that the sneeze made his head hurt. Huh! Shaking his head, Taoist Sunlong looked back in the direction of the Xiang family in confusion. He made calculations with his fingers and muttered, "Hey, could there be other variables?" After calculating for a long time, I didn't figure out who it was. It seemed like something was hiding my result. Hey, I don't believe it anymore. Taoist Sunlong doesn't believe in evil. Is there anything in this world that he can't figure out? He took out the copper coins from his sleeve and continued counting. 6 Yao divination, I didn't calculate it. I took out the precious turtle shell to bless it, but it still didn't count. He took out a ruler again and counted again and again, and finally got it. Wait, what is this? Taoist Sunlong's eyes flashed with light blue light, as if he wanted to see through nothingness. As a result, he took a closer look and saw a huge black-haired black tiger rushing towards him, aiming at Taoist Sunlong and taking a bite. Ouch! Taoist Sunlong was startled, jumped back, and almost fell down. He quickly waved his hand to block it, and when he looked up again, the black tiger had disappeared. Huh. At the Xiang family's banquet, Xiang Keding, who had just gone to the latrine, returned to the wine table. Looking at his calm expression, you knew that Xiang Keding's bag of tricks must not be too bad. Su Tong squinted and took a look. Sure enough, he had long luck, and even had a vague appearance of a carp transforming into a dragon. As the two of them were saying this, Su Tong suddenly trembled and looked around suspiciously. What's wrong? Xiang Keding saw that he suddenly stopped talking and couldn't help asking. It's okay. Why has Brother Li been away for so long and still not back yet? Su Tong casually found an excuse to fool him, but he felt very strange in his heart. Just now, the passive skill Uncrowned King of this prop card was activated. Although I don't know what happened again, I always feel that nothing good happened. Ignore him, he is familiar with this place anyway, and I'm not afraid of him getting lost. Xiang Keding said disapprovingly. Look, the singing and dancing has begun. Xiang Keding pointed at the dancer who came out in front, and his face couldn't help but turn red. It wasn't just him, when the singers came out wearing costumes worthy of Venus. The eyes of everyone present almost popped out of their heads. Strips of white thighs, and a pink gauze skirt so thin that it can be seen with the naked eye. Not to mention Xiang Keding, Su Tong glanced at his father Ma Chi, who was sitting at the front table, and saw that the wine in his father's hand had been spilled and he didn't know it. A piano music from a foreign country was playing on the gramophone. As if they had been rehearsed, the dancers stepped on the right drum beats to bring out the hidden protagonist Xiao Xiaofeng. This style is already a very common one in reality, and even the scenes that can be often seen in short videos naturally play a cross-generational role here. The Chinese style is mixed with the bold and hot fast pace of the West. It is a model of combining Chinese and Western styles. Of course, it also successfully attracted the attention of all the men present. Brother Ma, don't rob this woman from me. Xiang Keding swallowed and stared at the woman on the stage. Su Tong rolled his eyes at him. Don't worry, I won't compete with you. After saying that, he pointed to the people sitting at the front table. But I'm afraid you won't be able to grab it. Xiang Keding looked up when he heard this, and his face suddenly became embarrassed. I saw my father, Xiang Gongbeo, with his mouth wide open and his eyes almost bulging out of his head. He was holding his beard with 2 fingers and rubbing it until it almost turned into a rope. No one knows his father better than his son. How could Xiang Gongbeo not know who his father was? I'm afraid that after tonight, I will change my name to Banyang. Thinking of this, Xiang Ke suddenly felt as if he was dead. He sat down on the chair with a look of depression on his face, picked up the wine glass and drank heavily. Su Tong wanted to comfort him, but Xiang Keding didn't know what he was thinking of. He slapped the table, turned around and left. Su Tong was also confused. But the moment Xiang Keding stood up and left, Su Tong could feel an unprecedented anger pouring out of his heart. The banquet was vigorous and lasted until the middle of the night before finally ending. Su Tong helped Ma Chi return home, and after sending Ma Chi into the room, he was about to go back to his room to rest. As soon as he walked into the yard, he saw Mr. Wen Yuan already standing in the yard waiting for him. Gentlemen. Compared with before, Mr. Wen Fan, who received the incense, seemed more real at this time, and his expression no longer gave people the stale feeling as before. On the contrary, Mr. Wen Fan is more alive at this time, especially when he is sitting on the stool and looking at himself with a smile. The subtle differences may be inconspicuous, but the feelings are completely different. Come, sit down. Mr. Wen Yuan noticed Su Tong's forehead, his eyelids trembled slightly, motioned him to sit down, glanced at his forehead, his expression gradually became serious, and he reached out and wiped Su Tong's forehead a few times. I only felt that Mr. Wen Yuan's fingers were cold, and he wiped his forehead with his fingers, as if he were wiping them with an ice towel. After wiping a few times, Mr. Wen frowned. Su Tong could feel that the tips of Mr. Wen fingers were getting hot. He was using the merits of incense to try to change his destiny. I just tried it for a moment, but it still didn't work. You'd better not go out these days and hide at home. Maybe I can keep you safe. Mr. Wen frowned. Su Tong's fate had suddenly changed. He was just a little house god, and he was far from able to cover it up. Unless he can one day transform into the Yang god, he can only survive in this small old house. It doesn't matter, I already have a way to deal with it. Su Tong waved his hand to indicate that he had a solution, but he did not say what solution. When Mr. Wen saw this, he didn't say anything more. He stretched out his hand and took out a ball of dim light and handed it to Su Tong. This is yours. If it's missing a little, you might be able to use it if you keep it with you. According to the rules agreed at the beginning, the merits of the incense were divided into 30 and 70, and Su Tong and Mr. Wen split another half. In other words, only 1.5 of the 10 merits of the incense ended up in the hands of Mr. Wen. Although he was a little evil, Su Tong didn't intend to be a good person in this matter in vain. After all, the money he threw down was real money. Even if he has no idea about money, he can't work hard for a long time without getting enough benefits. When the sky was getting dark the next day, Su Tong held his breath and walked into the palace gate before it was about to close. Last night, Ma Chi told him that he would be on duty in the palace starting from today, but this time he was no longer a guard of the Forbidden Army, but became an apprentice of Qin Tian prison through the operation of Ma Chi and Fu Anning. Although he is an apprentice, to put it bluntly, he functions more like a security guard and waiter. I don't know if Fu Anning did it on purpose. On the first day of duty, Fu Anning was assigned to work the night shift. In fact, he wanted to rest for 2 days and figure out Leroux's matter, but he couldn't bear it and Ma Chi came to knock on his door early after leaving court, so he could only go to the palace in despair to be on duty. I was sighing in my heart, and as soon as I walked to the gate of Qintian prison, I saw Yang Gongjing standing there with a dark face. Seeing Su Tong coming, Yang Gongjing glanced at him with a cold face. Be on duty well. Remember here, talk less and watch more. What skills you can learn depends on your own life. After speaking, he took off a waist badge and handed it over. Some time ago, one of the young eunuchs from Qin Tianjian got lost. During this time, you should take over his work first. As Yang Gongjing spoke, she called Li 11 and asked him to take Su Tong to Qintian prison to take over Xiao Lizi's work. Congratulations, brother Marco. Li 11 pulled Su Tong inside, not to mention how happy he was. He took Su Tong for a walk and explained all the things in Qintian prison in detail. In fact, Li 11 stopped him from doing most of the work. Some easier things were left to Su Tong. Brother Ma, you are on duty tonight. Take the time to sleep in the first half of the night. When you hear the golden rooster crow in the second half of the night, you can't sleep anymore. In addition, I have prepared snacks for you. Li 11 was very well prepared. Apparently, he started preparations after learning that Su Tong was coming to Qintian prison to be an apprentice. Things were ready, and Li 11 was about to leave. Just after taking 2 steps, he suddenly remembered something. Hey, brother Ma, other things are easy to discuss, but please listen carefully to 2 things. The first thing is Qian don't go into the attic, it's the secret volume room of Qin Tian prison. Su Tong raised his head and took a look and saw an inconspicuous staircase leading along the partition wall to the roof. Although I don't know what is on it, it must not be an ordinary thing if it can be put into the tantric room. What about the second one? Su Tong asked curiously. Li 11 took his hand and pointed to the vermilion door behind Qin Tian prison. If there is any movement inside at night, please do not open the door, and do not go in. At this point, Li 11 lowered his voice. It is said that it is full of dirty things. Before the death of Emperor Chong of the previous dynasty, he ordered that all the female officials in the palace be killed. All the bodies of those female officials were thrown into it. It is a dangerous place. What little means we have, it may not be possible to lower it. Seeing the ruin of his country and his family, Emperor Chong of the previous dynasty would rather order all the palace maids to be killed than let these palace maids be abused by the bannermen. Among them were the empress, concubines, princesses, etc. of Emperor Chong. After killing them all, they walked to the back mountain and committed suicide. There were too many corpses of concubines and palace maids, and those that could not be disposed of were all thrown into the courtyard. As a result, the courtyard became more and more evil later on. There was a reason why the Kintian prison was built in this location. In short, the previous disappearance of Xiao Litsi cannot be said to be related to this incident. After all, some people said that they saw Xiao Litsi wandering in early in the morning and never came out again. When Su Tong heard this, he looked inside the door through his life ikumen. At a glance, the place was dark and nothing could be seen. There are really so many evil spirits. Su Tongnang thought, isn't this a pillow for sleep? He was worried about how he could continue to improve with Shankao, but he encountered such a good place. Anyway, please be careful. Don't touch that door unless absolutely necessary. Li 11 warned him repeatedly, fearing that this skilled man would be bold and rush in to have fun on a whim. After giving the instructions, Li 11 left with peace of mind. After Li 11 left, soon there were special eunuchs and imperial guards locking the palace doors one by one. Buzz. The vermilion door slowly closed, and the entire courtyard gradually began to become quiet. Su Tong lay on the chair. After making sure that no one was outside, he jumped up from the recliner with a carp flip. First, I took a look at the attic above my head. This place is a treasure house, but I am not in a hurry to explore it. On the contrary, I am quite interested in the vermilion door Li 11 mentioned. I walked over and took a peek inside through the crack in the door. I saw that the inside was overgrown with grass and dilapidated. It didn't look like it was inhabited at all. Seeing this, he tried knocking on the door. Boom, boom, boom. The door made a dull roar, and as soon as the sound fell, a sentence was heard from inside, "Who is it?" The voice was very lazy, and it sounded like a woman's voice. Su Tong glanced sideways at the crack in the door and saw nothing behind it, but there was a stench in the air. Seeing this, he took half a step back and shouted towards the door, "Open the door and check the water meter. I feel sick to my stomach today, so I'll update another chapter first." Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 382. Behind the door. Bang bang bang. Open the door and bring you takeout. Su Tong knocked on the door for a long time, but it didn't move at all. It was quiet inside, with no sound at all. Boring. Seeing that the door refused to open, Su Tong simply jumped up and climbed over the wall to get in. "Since you don't come towards me, then I will walk towards you. The high vermilion wall may be unattainable to others, but it is not difficult for you at all. Tiptoe, step on the wall and jump in." After climbing over the wall and taking a closer look, I realized that this place was much larger than I thought. There were two houses behind a huge yard. The carved dragons and painted columns in the east and west wing corridors are overgrown with weeds and look a bit dilapidated, but there is nothing scary about them. Good guy, this yard is bigger than my house. Looking around with the help of Chi Men's life eye, Su Tong couldn't help but feel disappointed. There was nothing. Just now I clearly saw that it was dark and ghostly. I thought, now it's better, the practice of Beishinko is now complete. But when I came in, I found that there was nothing. Those terrible yin qi disappeared without a trace, as if they didn't exist at all. Could it be that the way I entered the door was wrong? Su Tong looked at the empty yard and couldn't help but think about it. He simply jumped over the wall again and took a look behind him. A strange scene appeared. There was a gloomy air inside the backyard door behind him, forming a terrifying black hole, as if it penetrated into the underworld of Yama. Just separated by a red door, it seems to be isolated from the world. So that's it? Seeing this, Su Tong understood in his heart that there was a high probability that some strange formations had been arranged in this place by the masters of the Kintian prison. All the unclean things were suppressed behind this door. The only real entrance was this door. There was nothing there if you climbed over the wall. Rather than saying that Qin Tianji unsealed the entire courtyard, it would be better to say that only this door was sealed. Knowing the reason, he knocked on the door tentatively again, but unfortunately no one answered him this time. This made him feel so depressed that he could only go back to the room and pick up a few books to kill time. At this moment, the prompts from the prop book continued to sound. Chi Men's proficiency is rising rapidly. Although the amount of each upgrade is very small, only 1 or 2 points of proficiency, and the highest is only 3 points, the reason why the amount of improvement is small. It's because it's not difficult at all. There are too many poor people in the slums of the capital. It is common to not have enough clothes to cover your body and not enough food to cover your belly. In addition, the capital is extremely cold in winter. Bodies frozen to death on the streets in severe winter can be seen at any time, especially on snowy nights. After a heavy snowfall, it was common for 12 corpses to be found in a small alley less than a kilometer long. This year, under Su Tong's care, these people have become his main customers, because it is too easy to change their destiny. A thick cotton coat and a bag of rice basically solve the problem of food and clothing. Qian Shao and the others opened a porridge shack in the east of the city and gave thick cotton-padded clothes to the common people. Bai Shitong was responsible for the publicity work. Now everyone in the capital knows that there is a blessed immortal who is helping people survive the harsh winter. Of course, there are still a few unlucky ones who are really doomed and cannot be saved, but those are just a few scattered ones, and they don't matter anymore. Precisely because of its simplicity, most of them contribute only a little proficiency. Fortunately, the quantity cannot be tolerated. Seeing the proficiency of more than half, Su Tong's mood instantly became better. It's still early for the golden rooster to crow. Since he can't open the door now, he simply ignores him for now. There is nothing else in this place like Kintianjian, but if you want to talk about books, the amount of storage here is enough to keep people interested for a lifetime. And the books here are not the 4 books and 5 classics, Tang poetry, and song lyrics. On the contrary, the books stored here range from the Book of Changes and Bagua to mountains and rivers, geography, feng shui, yin and yang, mathematics, solar terms. It can be said that they are all available. If other civil servants are regarded as liberal arts students, then Kintian prison is definitely a place where science courses are pursued, and only top academics can enter. What a great place! No wonder Li 11 was able to plan such a big plan later. Summoning strangers from all over the world for his own use, planning far-reaching plans, and trying to reach the sky in one step. Obviously, Li 11's subsequent actions must have a huge connection with his experience in Kintian prison. At this time, he saw a roll of blueprints on the table with the words Heavenly Secret Map of the Divine Capital written on it. Open it and you will see the geographical location map of City L. In addition to the Shangqing Palace and Bamang Mountain that he was familiar with, the blurred lines on the drawing outlined all the yin-yang feng shui and bagua directions of the entire city. There are several places marked with red pens, one of which is the Sui and Tang Botanical Gardens. Are these red pens? Su Tong looked down and saw that there were notes underneath the drawing. The place marked with the red pen was the entrance to the ghost market in L City. Behind the drawings is a detailed record. It probably means that L City has been a battleground for military strategists since ancient times. Too many wars have resulted in countless ghosts under the city being unable to reincarnate. Among them, there are still a few ghost kings who have established themselves and have never listened to the instructions of the netherworld. It is recommended to plant a ghost tree at the locations of Phoenix Eye and Longan in L City to facilitate suppression. Su Tong searched for the location, not to mention that he actually found it. Moreover, he had passed by this place before. It was Ma Shi Street. There was indeed an old locust tree in it. The core of the tree was empty, but the ancient tree was still alive and healthy. As for the Longan, after searching for a long time on the map, I didn't see the location of Longan. The good stuff belongs to me. This is a good thing, and Su Tong will naturally not miss it. He just throws it into the prop book, not knowing when it will be used. I continued to rummage around and found that there were regional labels on every bookshelf. By the way, I wonder if we can find the yin-yang cave that Gao Zhou mentioned. Part of Grandpa Gao Zhou's soul was lost in the yin-yang cave. They agreed to find it, but they didn't know much about the yin-yang cave. The master and Gao Zhou mentioned part of it, but they didn't. Let's talk about the details. Since there is so much information here, why not look for it yourself to prepare for a rainy day? According to the label, Su Tong found a geographical map near the geographical map of Western Hunan, but there was no yin-yang cave marked in it. After looking through a few more books, he still couldn't find it, which made him a little disappointed, but then he thought about it. If there really was a yin-yang cave, would the information be locked in the archives tantra room in the attic? He looked at the steps leading to the corner, hesitated, and finally gave up the idea of going in to take a look. It's not that he lacks courage, but when this desire appears, a strong sense of resistance immediately emerges in his heart. There were even fierce ripples around him. This strong feeling seemed to be the instinct of his body warning him not to try it easily. This was obviously not a very good idea. For this reason, Su Tong also made a fortune telling, and the result was a fortune. Seeing this, he had to give up the idea for the time being and wait to see if there was a chance to go up. When the golden rooster crowed, it was already about 6 o'clock in the morning. At this time, the ministers had not yet gone to court, but the eunuchs in the palace had already begun to open the doors one after another. Li 11 walked in carrying a food box. As soon as he entered the door, he saw Su Tong holding a volume of books and looking attentively. He smiled and said, "Brother Ma didn't sleep last night." As he spoke, he opened the food box and took out a bowl of still warm tofu puffs and 2 fried dough sticks. "I know you have a big appetite, so you can make do with these things first. When the adults go to court later, it's time for us to change shifts." Su Tong didn't care. He picked up the bowl and took 2 bites, then pointed to the top of his head, "I want to go in and see. Is there any way?" Li 11's expression changed slightly, and he quickly motioned for him to silence. He whispered, "Brother Ma, this is no joke. The things above are all secrets. There are even some things. Who knows who will die? What are you doing up there?" "I want to check some information. I searched this place all over last night and couldn't find it." Li 11 was startled when he heard this, and looked at Su Tong with a deep look. Unexpectedly, Su Tong said with an indifferent expression, "Don't look at me like that. I'm here just for this information. Otherwise, why would I go to such trouble here?" Li 11 thought about it and said, "But Brother Ma, there's really nothing we can do about it, let alone you, even Lord Ji Unzhang can't do it. It turns out that the entire attic is made of fine iron. It contains not only the mechanisms and talismans left by the previous generations of eunuchs, but also 2 keys to open the door. There is 1 key for the chief prison officer, and the 3 deputy prison guards take turns holding the other key. However, the Qin Tian prison is not liked by the long-live lord now, so the 2 vacant prison guards have not been filled, so the key should belong to Yang Gongjing. On hand. Both of them must carry these 2 keys with them at all times. Once they are lost, they will be in big trouble. So if you want to go upstairs, You can't even get in unless you arrest the two supervisors and take away their keys. After hearing Li 11's explanation, Su Tong was helpless. The two chatted for a while, but as they watched the sun gradually rise, the adults who were going down to court had not yet appeared. It's strange. At this point, the adults should have gone to court long ago. Li 11 looked in the direction of the inner palace and couldn't help but murmur in his heart. The ministers usually go to court at 4 o'clock in the morning. They should go to court at dawn in the morning, and then they start to perform their duties after going to court. But is it a little slow today? The two waited for a while, thinking that there might be some new policy in the court today, but while they were waiting, Su Tong's ears twitched slightly. Put down the book in your hand and look sideways in the direction of the door. I heard footsteps getting closer and closer, but the footsteps were not from the ministers, but more like a large group of people rushing towards this direction. Bang, the courtyard door of Kintian prison was kicked open. I saw a group of guards walking in with knives in hand. The leader of the army was still stained with blood on his face. He looked at Su Tong and Li 11 as they entered. After looking at Su Tong for a while, he pointed with the knife. He is Ma Hongguan, catch him alive. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 383. Move time forward one day. After the Xiang family banquet ended, Xiang Gongbeo drank a few cups of tea in the study, and the alcohol smell on his face dissipated a lot. Brother Wang, you are making things difficult for me. Xiang Gongbeo put down the tea in his hand and his expression became serious. Brother Xiang, when the country is in trouble, every man has a responsibility. Today's Holy Emperor is trying to reform and strengthen the country because he sincerely cares about the future generations of our great rule. Have you forgotten about the foreigners who used cannons to open the door of our country? Wang Tan had tears in his eyes, and when he talked about this incident, his breathing became rapid. Brother Xiang, have you forgotten what you said when we entered the capital together? Xiang Gongbeo was stunned when he heard this. He remembered that when they were young and came to Beijing, they just wanted to show what they had learned, establish a great cause, expel foreigners, and protect the family and the country. These 8 words still linger in my ears when I think of them. But, seeing that Xiang Gongbeo was still hesitating, Wang Tan opened his eyes. Early the next morning, the Queen Mother will issue an order to abolish the New Deal. If the New Deal does not exist, the country will perish. By then, even Long Live will not be able to escape unscathed. Our ministers will not be able to survive. Don't you understand the truth that a king's salary is due to his loyalty to the king? Brother Wang, stop talking. Xiang Gongbeo waved his hand. What do you want me to do? Seeing that Xiang Gongbeo agreed, Wang Tan was overjoyed and took out a roll of imperial edict that he had prepared early on from his sleeve. Imperial edict, the emperor's edict, says, Xiang Gongbeo serves the country and the people, is granted the title of Grand Tutor, and rules the army of the world. Generalissimo, mobilize the 3 armies to come here. Thank you Lord for your kindness, long live my emperor. Xiang Gongbeo was overjoyed when he heard this and quickly received the order to thank him. Brother Xiang. The next morning, at dawn, I believe that the imperial army is yours. As long as you lock the palace door and control the 8 banners camped outside the capital, that old woman won't be able to cause any trouble. Xiang Gongbeo nodded when he heard this. Ma Chi can help you seal the gates of the Forbidden Palace, but if you want to control the court, I'm afraid. The court was not only filled with wine and rice bags, but also many powerful generals. It wasn't that Xiang Gongbeo looked down upon them, but it was Wang Tan and the others who were incompetent scholars. If it really started to cause trouble, any general would not be able to do so. They can handle it. Mentioning this matter, A sneer appeared on Wang Tan's face. Don't worry, if 3,000 Shenji battalions are not enough, wouldn't adding one Wangwu be enough? Oh! When Xiang Gongbeo heard the words Wangwu, his brows furrowed, and he couldn't help but feel a little surprised. He didn't expect that he had underestimated the emperor. He was so well prepared. It was obvious that he had not prepared in a day or two. Wang Tan didn't say much. After deciding the matter, Wang Tan bowed deeply to Xiang Gongbeo. The rise and fall of the country, everything depends on Gongbeo. After that, he got up and left. After Wang Tan left, Xiang Keding walked out of the screen at the back. It turned out that he had been hiding behind the screen and listening quietly. After walking out at this moment, he sat on the chair and said, "Dad, Prince Gong is so smart. Let these nerds go make trouble and he will be responsible for ending it. When the time comes, the Queen Mother will be under pressure and have to let him take the position. Everything is just and justified." Hearing this, Xiang Gongbeo glanced at Xiang Keding and said nothing. He just picked up the teacup in his hand and began to think about it. Prince Gong exchanged his position as Admiral of the Nine Gates for an alliance with them, and it seemed that he had anticipated this day long ago. Even the old gods said that the fortune of Daetong dynasty will be exhausted, but there are still a few years of luck still there. The dragon veins will continue and new dragons will be born. This Prince Gong, I'm afraid he can't wait to sit on Xinlong's throne. Is it really good to just knock down a sick tiger and replace it with a bad wolf? The forbidden army rushed forward with a knife, and the momentum was so fierce. The moment he fell to the ground, the look on his face was so horrified. In their impression, Ma Chi's son was a well-known playboy in the capital, who could do nothing but harm the common people. To deal with such a rich boy, all they had to do was hand over the knife and the boy would be scared to death. Then they would slap him twice to make sure he was as obedient as a little chicken. However, the moment they handed the knife to Ma Hongwen's neck, things began to develop in a direction they did not expect. As soon as Su Tong raised his hand, the two forbidden soldiers who rushed up flew out. The others didn't even see clearly what happened. They followed Su Tong and pounced down. With his 5-animal grappler and close quarters fighting skills, he could deal with these forbidden troops with one slap at a time, giving Li 11 no chance to perform even if he wanted to finish off the attack. The leading soldier raised his sword and came over to kill him. He was obviously still a little confident in his own kung fu, but when he slashed down with his sword, Su Tongren disappeared in front of him. Where are the people? Looking at Ma Hongwen disappearing in front of him, Jun Han's pupils tightened and he subconsciously wanted to slash his back with the knife, but he was too slow. Before he even had time to lift the knife, two big hands fell on his shoulders, pinching and twisting his fingers. Crack, with a sound, both arms lost strength. Even the knife fell to the ground. Su Tong grabbed the guy's collar and pulled the face in front of him. "Who are you and why are you arresting me?" His father is Ma Chi, no one dares to catch him, but these people are obviously coming after him. This gave him a bad feeling. The other party's eyes widened and he was about to spit, but unfortunately Su Tong threw him in front of Li 11 with a wave of his hand. Da Ya and the others were not in the hall, so Su Tong could not use Da Ya's ability to use the charm technique to control the other party, but Da 11zi had plenty of ways to extract confessions through execution. Sure enough, Li 11 finally seized the opportunity to show off, stepped forward, and said in a neutral tone, "Since you don't want to say it, let us help you say it." Li 11 stretched out his hand, and a black mist surrounded his palm. It was the Mission Sec's unique skill, the soul-catching hand. With a pinch of his fingers, the black mist was like two slender silver needles, piercing into the soldier's eyes. Ah! The black mist was like ants, burrowing deep into the eyeballs. The indescribable pain made the military man want to dig out both of his eyeballs, but Su Tong had already removed his hands. He could fall to the ground and crawl like maggots. After a while, Li 11 stopped, and now the soldier was no longer tough. But he glared at Su Tong unwillingly and cursed, "A traitor who betrays his country and seeks glory." It turned out that early this morning, before the Empress Dowager Shenxi announced the abolition of the New Deal, the emperor launched an attack. The Shenji camp and a large number of new school students unexpectedly rushed in and surrounded the entire Qianqing palace, forcing the Queen Mother Shenxi to abdicate. Immediately, several military attaches rushed to take someone away, but without exception, they were killed on the spot by a man holding a big knife. Killing people is like chopping melons and vegetables. Among these military attaches, there are many who are top martial artists, but they can't survive a single round under the opponent's hands. This person is none other than the well-known great master in the capital, the great sword King Wu. It is said that the emperor took the lead in attacking and was fully prepared, so he should be victorious. With Xiang Gongbeo and Ma Qilai working together, it can be said that he controlled the inside and outside. I don't know how long it took to plan for an absolute advantage. But Xiang Gongbeo came, bringing the imperial army with him, but he was not on the emperor's side. So now the reform action of the new school students has turned into a one-sided massacre. Fortunately, a great master helped to disrupt the imperial army led by Xiang Gongbeo. Now the whole palace is in chaos. A pot of porridge. They were lucky enough to rush out first. They thought that Ma Qi's son, Su Tong, should be in Qintian prison, so they gritted their teeth and came to arrest Su Tong. As long as Ma Hongwen is caught, there is no fear that Ma Qi will defect before the battle. If Ma Qi doesn't defect before the battle, then they will kill Ma Hongwen and use him as a backing to eliminate harm for the people. This group of people are not bad at thinking. Su Tong praised their strategy. If Ma Hongwen was really here, they would most likely catch him. However, Su Tong is not Ma Hongwen, and their plan is doomed to fail. What to do? Li 11 also didn't expect that he would wake up early in the morning, hum a song and dance there, but he didn't know that he would encounter such a big thing. Su Tong ignored him and looked up at the sky. I saw that the huge forbidden city was already shrouded in dark clouds, and a thin dragon was fighting and struggling left and right, but he was too small. A purple dragon hovered in the dark clouds, and an old phoenix spread its wings and kept grabbing the dragon's head blaster. A tiger and a horse flanked it and attacked from both sides. No matter how hard the dragon struggled, it was useless. It was completely pressed to the ground and rubbed. However, Su Tong noticed that there were many strange auras competing with each other around these behemoths, among which a large ring-shaped sword was the most dazzling. The blade pierced and roared in the dark clouds, and actually cut a huge gash in the tiger's claws. Even the fierce horse was wounded in the chest by the machete. The blade made a clanging sound, exuding a terrifying murderous aura, and it was almost invincible. This broadsword should be the great sword King 5 that the military men call him. He is worthy of being a great master. If he really wants to leave, although the Forbidden Palace is big, it may not be able to keep him. Just when Su Tong was watching it wonderfully, Su Tong's heart suddenly skipped a beat. A familiar feeling swept through his whole body, and fierce ripples rippled around him, rolling towards him like a stormy sea. Hiss! It's him again. This feeling made a person pop up in Su Tong's mind, Zhao Sisan. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 384. He is coming here. How far is it? Have no idea. Using the word he to refer to him may be vague. But I don't know who he is, Zhao Sisan? No, it's just a disguised human skin. The real Zhao Sisan may have met the King of Hell the day before departure, or even earlier. The reason why I can feel his presence is because of the powerful perception brought to me after the improvement of the life icon. Looking at it, he saw that it was a venomous snake. It swayed in front of the shining sword, then quickly left the battlefield and ran towards the side. Su Tong looked at the sky and could even see this big snake, with two pairs of dark green eyes looking towards him. The hateful eyes made people feel suffocated. Apparently he was being targeted. Brother Ma, there must be chaos in the palace now, we might as well hide here. Li 11 casually killed the remaining rebels and suggested to Su Tong. But Li 11 didn't notice that at this moment, Su Tong was staring at Li 11's back with squinted eyes, hesitating about another thing in his eyes. Why don't you kill this guy now as a backup? Escape. The moment this idea arose, it was categorically rejected by Su Tong. Because this is not a good idea. Since the people of the new school decided to rebel and overthrow the Empress Dowager Shenxi, several palace doors must have been sealed. Even if the Xiang family suddenly betrayed, these palace doors would never be opened rashly. Perhaps with Ma Hongwen's identity, the guards blocking the palace gate could let them live. But it's certainly a gamble. What if the person who closed the palace door is not one of our own, or has an ulterior motive? These defenders may not be their opponents, but as long as they delay themselves a little, they may not open the door at all. When the poisonous snake catches up, there is no way he can survive with the Grand Master's methods. Furthermore, the trick at the riverside last time would definitely not work. Last time, the opponent was unprepared and was attacked. If he was prepared this time, how could the opponent still give him a chance if he attacks again? So my chances of winning this time are too slim. So much so that Su Tong began to think about killing Li 11 first as a backup. But after thinking again and again, Su Tong's eyes suddenly noticed the vermilion door. Brother Ma! Brother Ma! What are you doing? Don't mess around, don't mess around. Li 11 saw Su Tong suddenly pick up the big knife on the ground and walk towards the door, and hurriedly stepped forward to dissuade him. Su Tong walked to the door and stopped. Xiao Zizi. Ah! Do you remember what happened last time in Lianshan County when we were chased by a mysterious man? Oh, you were being hunted. When we woke up, we saw that you were almost dead. Su Tong nodded, this guy will be here soon. Ah! Li 11 was startled. It was okay if Su Tong didn't say anything. When he said this, Li 11 immediately felt a strong sense of crisis. With his special fate, Li 11 was able to survive to this day, no, even to the reform and opening up, and to live like an old bastard, not only because of his luck, but also because he has a natural intuition for danger. This sense of danger is extremely sensitive, comparable to that of a wild beast, and it is precisely because of this that Li 11 avoids death again and again. Brother Ma! Li 11's hair stood up all over his body and he took Su Tong's arm. I know a hidden place. It will be no problem for us to hide in it. Su Tong shook his head and refused. It's okay for you to hide in, and there must be something wrong with me. The other party is coming after me. After speaking, before Li 11 could say anything else, he gently pushed his hand away. We hit it off right away. I used to think that you were very similar to a friend of mine, but then I even felt that you were that friend of mine. I believe that there is such a thing as fate in this world, and I also believe that there will always be karma in the world. If we do it again, I think we can be a good pair of brothers and good confidants. Brother Ma, you. Li 11's face was a little hot. From the day he was born, the world seemed to be targeting him. His parents wanted to drown him, and the children in the same village would always bully him. Like other children, he had a strong fantasy about martial arts, which led him to meet a peerless master in his dream. The master looked at him, picked up a chopstick, and poked a hole in his heart. Even his most respected master only wanted to use him in the end. Li 11 had not heard such sincere words for a long, long time. Let's go. Leave right away before the other party comes. If it's too late, you won't be able to leave. Su Tong patted his shoulder and gently pushed him away. Brother Ma. Let's go and find the safest place to hide. If I don't survive, then maybe one day in the future, you may meet another me. Then, let's renew our brotherhood. After Su Tong finished speaking, he cut off the iron rope on the door in front of him with a knife, placed his hands flat on the door, and pushed in with all his strength. As the door gradually opened, a cold wind blew, making Li 11 shiver all over. The thick clothes on her body seemed to be unable to keep warm at all. "Let's go." Su Tong turned around and stared at him with red eyes. "Brother Ma, take care of yourself." Li 11 hesitated for a moment, gritted his teeth, turned around and walked towards the door, one step at a time, then slowly speeded up, until he threw off his arms and started running forward with his head buried in the air. Su Tong could even hear Li 11 sobbing while running. But Li 11 didn't notice that there was a paper man stuck on his back. What's strange is that the paper man's hands are holding a paper lotus. In the lotus, a weak flame flashes, as if it can be extinguished at any time. In the last script world, the master took himself and Gao Zhou to Mang Mountain to find a fool. At that time, in order to find out the situation in the cave, the master taught Su Tong a trick on the spot, hanging a lamp to illuminate the way. Volume 5, Chapter 113. Later, after research, I found that this thing was easy to use, but it was a bit flashy for me. The so-called hanging lamp illuminates the road, but the lamp burns one's own essence and spirit. The master is a figure who is destined to be a protagonist, and his energy and spirit have reached an incredible level, and the natural fire is harmful wherever it goes. Compared with his master, he is just a blur of candlelight. The slightest disturbance can extinguish his own flame. But one thing about this thing is true. The energy burning on it is separated from his own body. This is the source that the other party is tracking. So looking at Li 11 running further and further away, the only thing Su Tong could do was to put his hands together and silently pray for him. "Run fast, may Buddha bless you. Amen, Hallelujah." After saying that, he turned back and looked at the door in front of him that had been pushed open by him. As I had guessed before, the door itself is the key to the seal. If you don't go through the door and climb over the wall, you will only see loneliness. But if you enter through this door, it will be different. I can't say what's different, but at least when I climbed over the wall and went in, I didn't see so many coffins in the huge yard in front of me. After walking through the door, Su Tong turned around and closed the door. If the seal is as he suspected, then this door should be able to completely isolate his breath. At least it is not that easy for the great master to track himself. The black coffins were neatly placed in a row. Every coffin is sealed with densely packed talismans. A means between reality and fiction? Or is it a more sophisticated method? Separated by a door, there are two worlds, yin and yang. Such a magical method seems to be somewhat similar to the ghost market, but the difference is that the ghost market is naturally formed. If you insist on explaining it, there is a huge mass grave below, and there is nowhere to vent the overwhelming grievances. Over time, another gap has formed. World. But this is the Forbidden Palace in Beijing. How could there be a mass grave? After all, he is not the emperor, but a figure fiend. Therefore, in Su Tong's view, the world in front of him can be understood as something created by man. However, even a great master cannot always maintain the balance between reality and reality, let alone maintain it for hundreds of years. Not to mention the great master, I am afraid that even the master blessed by destiny cannot do this. How is this done? With curiosity, Su Tong walked to a coffin and stretched out his finger. Bang 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 bang. Anyone there? The community sends warmth, and the funeral procession is a one-stop service. No one responded, so Su Tong simply tried to open the coffin lid and pushed hard twice. The coffin lid didn't move at all, and the coffin didn't even shake at all. With my own strength, even a cow may not be able to push a coffin, let alone push it. But the coffin here seems to be firmly fixed on the ground. The coffin in front of him could not be opened, so he could only continue walking inside to see what was inside. Shashasha. There is a thick layer of dead grass under your feet, which rustles when you step on it. The originally vibrant camphor tree in the courtyard was withered, dry and cracked, as if it might collapse at any time. Don't kill me, don't kill me, don't kill me, weev. Passing through the lotus gate, a burst of crying came. Following the sound to the side room, Su Tong tilted his head and took a look. A young eunuch was huddled in the corner, like a frightened little hedgehog, wishing he could curl himself up into a ball. You are little plum. I remember that Li 11 mentioned to himself last night that the missing eunuch was called Xiao Litsi. Someone watched him walk through the door and never came out again. Ah! Hearing someone calling him, Xiao Litsi looked up and saw the head with a crooked neck. He was so frightened that his whole body shivered, and even the braids on the back of his head stood up. You, don't kill me, don't kill me. Why are you killing me? Are you Xiao Litsi? Do you know Li 11? After hearing Su Tong mention the familiar name Li 11, Xiao Litsi was startled, his tense expression gradually relaxed, and he nodded. It wasn't until Su Tong walked out from behind the door, revealing his apprentice's green shirt, that Xiao Litsi finally breathed a sigh of relief. He looked Su Tong up and down. Why are you wearing the green shirt of an apprentice of Qin Tianjian? Why haven't I seen you? Oh, I just got hired. Then why did you come in? Are you crazy? You can't come here. I'm here to bring warmth. Warm? Who is warm? After Xiao Litsi finished speaking, he realized that the topic had gone astray, and hurriedly called Su Tong over. SHH, stop talking loudly. Look, the ladies are all sleeping. As soon as Xiao Litsi finished speaking, the surrounding coffins began to tremble slightly, and Xiao Litsi's face changed slightly when he saw this. Let's go. As he spoke, he pulled Su Tong and ran to one side, until he came to a dilapidated palace. The palace was extremely dilapidated and empty inside, but there was a coffin placed in the center. Xiao Litsi pushed him in. Hurry up, hide, don't let them find out. Isn't there also a coffin? Su Tong looked at where such a big coffin was placed in the room and couldn't help asking Xiao Litsi. Don't worry, the coffin hasn't been opened for a long time. If you hide here, you'll be fine. How about you? I'm fine. The most they can do is give me a beating to vent their anger. You are different. You are a living person. If they find you. Before Xiao Litsi finished speaking, he raised his head and glanced outside. No more, remember, don't be born. They will go back to sleep in the coffin after making a fuss for a while, and then we will find a way to send you out. After saying that, Xiao Litsi turned around and ran over. After a while, the noise outside became louder and louder. There was a creaking sound of the coffin boards twisting. As one coffin after another was slowly opened, a woman wearing a long skirt woke up from the coffin. A sweet-looking girl took a breath, as if she had been sleeping for a long time. She stood up from the coffin, stretched out her arms, then took her head off her neck and arranged it at will. He took off his messy hair and put it back on his neck. He lifted his nose and took a sip in the air, then smacked his mouth with a sleepy look. Third sister, I really want to smell the scent of a living person. A living person? I haven't seen a living person in more than 10 years. Where did a living person come from? Are you suffering from sleep hysteria? In another coffin, a woman slowly sat up and complained, last time, I managed to trick one in. I originally planned to put it back in a few days and let him bring in more living people. You guys, I was not paying attention, you just ate people. Hey, I'm so hungry. The woman grinned, revealing 2 small dimples on her baby face. Stop talking nonsense, hurry up, eldest sister is getting up, be careful. She has been sleeping for 30 years, and I don't know why she woke up today. Come on, Don't wake up and find you later. You're naughty too, be careful she peels off your skin. Then there must be skin that can be peeled off. The girl stuck out her tongue and jumped out of the coffin. More and more coffins were gradually pushed away, but not all of them were women. There were many men and maids inside. Greetings to both masters. When Xiao Litzi saw that the two principals were awake, he hurriedly crawled over and knelt on the ground to greet the two women. Neither of the two women had a good impression of the little eunuch with pigtails. The woman called the third sister even kicked Xiao Litzi's head out of temper. You bitch, I get angry when I see you. I don't have time to deal with you today. When my eldest sister wakes up later, I will inevitably skin you and make a kite. Xiao Litzi was stepped on the head and did not dare to say a word, but when he heard the words behind him, he was stunned for a moment, raised his head and said, "The princess wants to wake up." After saying that, my heart skipped a beat, and I looked back at the most inconspicuous palace. It's broken. Isn't this going to put people in a trap? Originally 2 updates were written, but when I looked at it after the second update was written, it wasn't ugly, but it felt wrong, as if it was written crookedly, but it was too late to look at it, so I hesitated and deleted it. Otherwise, it will become more and more crooked. I will update it today. You can just think that I am asking for leave. I am very helpless and have been writing for a whole day.